We are holding on page Daled Amud Beis, page 4, side B. And we were talking about the law of Ma'ariv. If one needs to recite the Shemona Esrei immediately after the blessing of Gal Yisrael. So we had a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And Rabbi Yochanan held that you should connect Geula to Ma'ariv, to the Shemona Esrei, even in Ma'ariv. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said that it's not necessary. In fact, supposed to do the Shemona Esrei first, and then you do the other prayer, the Shema, with its blessings. And the Gemara said that the argument was based either on logic, svara, or kra, or a pasuk. And the Gemara said a pasuk would be b'shach b'chov kumecha, you're asleep and you're going to sleep, waking up. If it has to be first Shema and then Shemona Esrei, just like the morning we know has to be Shema, then Shemona Esrei, also the evening. Or the other explanation, the other way of looking at it was that just like the morning, the Shema is closer to your bed, also the evening, the Shema should be closer to your bed. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said you should daven the Shemona Esrei first and then do the Shema with its blessings. And the logic was based on when was the Geula, when was the redemption? Was it only in the morning and the night one is insignificant, or is the night Geula also considered significant when we left Egypt? And therefore, it would obligate one to commemorate the Geula at night, and it should be when you mention when you daven Ma'ariv, you would want to emphasize the Geula and right afterwards the Tefillah. Or if it was insignificant at night, then it wouldn't be important to connect the Geula with Tefillah. So the Gemara that we're up to is 6 lines from the middle-sized lines. It's like 3/4 of the way down the page, or maybe 2/3 of the way down the page. And it starts with the word Mesiv. Mesiv Mar Berei de Ravina. Mar, the son of Ravina, asked a contradiction. And he said, Be'erev mevarech shtayim lefaneha u'shtayim liachareha. We learn later on that in the evening, and this is a Mishnah on page Yud Aleph, and the Mishnah there says that in the evening you make 2 brachos before Shema and 2 brachos after Shema. That's what the Mishnah says. We know what those brachos are. The brachas before Shema in the evening are Ma'ariv Aravim, and then the second bracha before Shema is Ohev Amo Yisrael, and then the 2 brachas after Shema is the bracha Goal Yisrael and the bracha Shomer Es Amo Yisrael Oad, or some say Shomer Amo Yisrael Oad without the word Es, and those are the 2 brachas after Shema. Now, the question that Mar Berei de Ravina is asking, he explains, he expresses. He says, V'i amrit, and if you're going to say, Bo'i lismaich, a person needs to recite, needs to bring close the blessing of Gal Yisrael to Shemona Esrei, Haloi kasamach geula l'tefillah. You aren't doing that. you are not bringing close the geula to tefillah, the haba'i lameimar hashkivenu, because a person needs to say the second blessing of hashkivenu. And what his question is, if you have two blessings after Shema, and if the first blessing after Shema is Goal Yisrael, that second blessing after Shema is going to be an interruption between the Geula blessing, the redemption, and the Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah. And that is his question. We see in a Mishnah that you do need to recite that blessing. So that Mishnah should be a clear proof that you don't have to be Samach Geula L'Tfilah. That Mishnah seems to be pretty clear that we don't care about connecting Geula to Tefillah. You see, the idea of connecting Geula to Tefillah, it emphasizes two things. Number one, it emphasizes you can't interrupt. You can't interrupt with anything else. So if we're trying to connect Geula to Tefillah, if you interrupt, then you ruin it. And if you, even with a blessing, you can't interrupt. Geula should be right before Tefillah. And the other thing that we saw earlier was that if you're reciting Geula close to Tefillah, you wouldn't be able to do it afterwards because you would also be interrupting with prayers. You would be praying the Shemoneh Esrei, and then you would have the blessings before Shema, and then finally you would have the blessing of Gal Yisrael. So the idea is that we can't interrupt even with prayers, and if so, how does our Gemara think that you could recite you could be obligated to be Saimech Geula to Tefillah, to connect Geula and Tefillah without interruption? And we know the Mishnah says clearly that you do interrupt. You have to say a second blessing called Hashkivenu, which ends with Shomer Amo Yisrael Oad. So that is the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, Amri, we say, Kivan Takina Rabbanan Hashkivenu, since the rabbis established Hashkivenu, and they said we are obligated to recite Hashkivenu, when the rabbis made this an obligation, they made this blessing into an official blessing. Ki geula arichta damya, it is like a lengthy geula. It is similar to the geula blessing, and therefore it is not an interruption. So what we are coming up with as an answer is that Hashkivenu is somehow considered a continuation of Geula. And the question is how? How could Hashkivenu be a continuation of Geula? I mean, it doesn't say Hashem redeemed us. We're asking Hashem to give us safety and protection. You know, the blessing of Geula is like the past tense, Goal Yisrael, he redeemed us, which is different than the Shemoneh Esrei blessing. In the middle of the Shemoneh Esrei, we also say a blessing similar, but we say Goyel Yisrael. He does redeem us, which means all of our tzaras, in the future, he continues in the present and the future. That's Goyel Yisrael, but that's not the same as the blessing before Shemoneh Esrei. The blessing before Shemoneh Esrei is Goal Yisrael, he redeemed us. Now the bracha Hashkivenu, it is the blessing of like present and future, of he guards us forever. Shomer es Amo Yisrael Oad, or Shomer Amo Yisrael Oad, according to the different texts, different gersois, different versions. But it's that he protects us forever. So the Gemara says that it's considered a long geula. In other words, the Gemara doesn't say it is clearly geula, but that it's damya, it's considered to be geula. It's similar to geula arichta, it's considered to be geula arichta. It's considered to be a lengthy geula, blessing of geula, like it's a continuation of the blessing of geula. So Rabbeinu Yoina explains that when all the plagues were happening to the Egyptians, the Yidden were praying that Hashem should protect them. And because of that, the blessing of Shemer Amma Yisrael Oad is a blessing commemorating the prayers of the Jewish people in Egypt. Of course, it also has implication now that we're asking Hashem to give us protection, but it's commemorating the exodus from Egypt as well. And how is it commemorating? Because in Egypt, we were also reciting this prayer. And not exactly these words, but the idea of this prayer was mentioned in Egypt. And because of that, we are reciting it now. It also includes a commemoration of Egypt. It is also praising Hashem for the plagues of Egypt that we prayed to Hashem that they shouldn't affect us, and they didn't, and we were saved. And so this is a continuation of the Geula prayer in a slight way. And because of that, it's not an interruption. And so that's the explanation of this Gemara. And the Gemara continues, and it says, and we see that the idea of connecting Geula to Tefillah allows certain it's a little open to allow other areas, other prayers in. For example, the Gemara gives an example that we see that we allow you to say the blessing of Hashem's, the verse, Hashem Sefasai Tiftach, before the Shemana Esrei also. That's also not really part of the Geula or Shemana Esrei. It wasn't part of the established Shemana Esrei. And the Gemara says, the Eloi Temahachi, if you're not going to say this explanation of Hashkivenu, that it could be included in considered Geula Arichta, Shacharis, by the morning, Hechi Matzi Samach, how are you able to connect Geula to Tefillah? Veha Amar Rabbi Yochanan, didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Betchila, in the beginning, Omer Hashem Sefasai Tiftach. You're supposed to say a verse from Psalms that Hashem opened my mouth, Ufi Yagiti Lasecha, and my lips, my mouth will open my lips and my mouth will speak your praises. So how are you able to be Saimech Geula to Tefillah if you interrupt with this verse? And then the statement of Rabbi Yochanan continues something else that's not applicable to what we're talking about, but it continues and it says, V'lebsaif, and at the end of Shemana Esrei, who Aimer, a person should say, Yihiyu l'ratzain imrei fi, let it be for pleasure to Hashem, the words of my mouth. Let it be wanted by Hashem, the words of my mouth. So we see from there that you do interrupt with a verse. But if you interrupt with a verse, how are you connecting Geula to Tefillah? So the Gemara answers that we consider that verse, Ella Hassam, but there, Kivan to Takina Rabbanan, since the rabbis established Lameimar to say, Hashem Sefasai Tiftach, open my lips. It's ketfila arichta damya. It's considered like a lengthy tefillah. It's a continuation of the part of the davening, part of the Shemana Esrei that you're connecting the geula to tefillah. This is like a part of the tefillah. Hachanami. So here also in the evening, kivan the takina rabbanan lameimar hashkivenu. Since the rabbis established a rule to say hashkivenu geula arichta damya, it is considered like a lengthy geula. It is considered like a long geula, and therefore it is not a problem. It is not messing up the inyan, the importance of being connecting geula to tefillah. Howard, you have a question?
Yes. What about in Ma'ariv saying the extra bracha, Baruch Hashem Le'olam, Amen v'Amen?
Right. Good. Very good question. And definitely someone brought it up last week. I don't know if it was you or maybe Jerry or Manny, but they did bring it up last week. And I mentioned that we'll see, and that's really this Tosfos here. There's and it's really subject to a big discussion because, interestingly enough, the siddur of the Alter Rebbe, or the Ari HaKadosh, which is based on the nusach of the Ari, it doesn't have it there. The blessing Baruch Hashem B'Yolam, and so Lubavitch doesn't say that blessing. And interestingly enough, the Vilna Gaon also didn't have that blessing, didn't say that blessing. And so there's many very strong Litvaks, very serious Litvaks in Israel that follow the Vilna Gaon. They don't interrupt with that either. So you have the Chassidim and the real the strong Misnagdim don't seem to say it, but the common minhag definitely for generations was to say it. There's no question about it, and it's brought in Tosfos. That means even in his day, in Tosfos' time, it was common to say. And the prayer of Baruch Hashem Li'olam Amen V'Amen, Tosfos says that it seems since the rabbis established to say this, it's considered like a geula arichta. Now, it's considered like a lengthy geula. These verses are like a continuation of the geula blessing. And Tosfos continues, and he says, the purpose of reciting these was in order for your friend to be able to daven, and people won't leave until everyone finishes their davening. So that's why what used to be, the reason why they established this was people would come late to shul. And because they would come late to daven, not really to shul, they used to daven in the field, but people would arrive late. And because they would arrive late, the rabbis established this extra blessing. So the people who came early, they would be stuck saying this extra blessing, not stuck, but they would end up spending time saying this extra blessing while the other people would catch up. And it would seem like they skipped this other blessing, the people who came late. And that's what it would seem like, because it was made in order to cause the others to be able to catch up. At least that would be the simple understanding. So the others would probably skip it, and then they could all say the Shemona Esrei together and leave together, and you wouldn't end up leaving some people in the field alone. And that's why. So because of that, because it's in order for the tefillah. It was somehow it's considered like a lengthy geula. Now, I don't know exactly the mechanics of how it's specifically considered like a geula. Is it because the verses imply, talk about the redemption? What the verses? I have to see if I have such a siddur here. The truth is, I don't recite it, so I'm talking about a prayer that I'm not so familiar with. But let's see. So the verses of Baruch Hashem Li'olam, it has Yehi Chavoid, Hashem Li'olam, Hashem's honor, Hashem's name should be blessed. Hashem never forsakes us. The whole nation saw and they fell on their face and they said Hashem Hu Elokim, Hashem Hu Elokim, which is really referring to the story in about Elisha or Elio. And
which center are you looking in?
I have the art scroll that has the this prayer, but it's not in the Lubavitch Siddur.
Is it Ashkenazi or Sephardi? Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking in the Ashkenaz. Why is this
Sephardi? No. I have all the Siddurim because I hate to break in, but for about I guess almost 10 years I used to daven Shachris with the Sharei Ezra on 41st Street. So I have all their Siddurim also. So that's why I'm asking. That's unbelievable. I mean, they're davening with these people when they open the Aron HaKodesh. First of all, it takes Hercules to pick up their Sefer Torah. I mean, I never knew they existed till I walked in there. It was really a beautiful experience being there for so many years. Just wanted to break in, their siddur is something. Just to have it in the house is a big mitzvah, in my opinion. You got to look. Am I right, Rabbi? I mean, have you seen it?
People are the holy of holies.
Unbelievable. Exactly. Yes.
I mean, every Yid is holy of holies, but Sephardic people have a special connection to Hashem.
100%.
We're called the Kalta Litvaks, the cold-blooded
Litvaks.
Sephardic people have a much stronger connection to Hashem. We will be lucky if we could be able to even daven in their shul.
Right. But that's another story, which I won't get into now. That they
you have a special merit. But in any event, that's the way Tosfos explains that this is considered a Geula Arichta. And then Tosfos mentions this idea that the reason why it was established so people will be there, wait there for the other people to come. And then he mentions another thing, interestingly enough, that blessing has 18 times Hashem's name, which means that it was established similar to the 18 Brochos of Shemoneh Esrei. And the end where it says Yiro Einenu, that's like an add-on. But the main part of it is the 18 Brochos, which are similar to Shemoneh Esrei. Now, what it could be that Tosfos is saying is that when you're reciting it, this is like the Shemoneh Esrei being close to Geula. It could also be that there might have been a tradition not even to say Shemoneh Esrei at Ma'ariv, and this was the prayer that they would recite as part of the of their Ma'ariv. They wouldn't say Shemoneh Esrei. Maybe there was it was not established as an obligation. So they used to say, they would say this prayer. And then when it became more accepted to daven Ma'ariv, they continued reciting this prayer. But this initially was the Shemoneh Esrei, so to speak. This was the prayer of Ma'ariv. And so that's why it maybe was, it's not a problem. It's not a contradiction to the, to the connecting Geula to Tefillah, because this itself was the Tefillah. Now, Tosfos then says that the halacha is like Reb Yochanan, because the Brisa goes like him, and the earlier Brisa, which said, it said in the earlier Brisa, Shema and then Shemoneh Esrei, that earlier brisa that we had earlier on the page. So that brisa seemed to imply that you have to first daven, say Shema and the blessings of Shema, and then Shemona Esrei. And that's what he says, and so did the Bahag Paskin. If so, what that means is that you have to be careful not to interrupt. So what comes out from here is that a person has to be careful not to speak in the middle, in between, even certain answering certain amains, and if you're in the middle of that, if you're in between Gal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei, you don't just answer any amain. You can't just answer amains or other prayers. And then he brings Reb Amram. Reb Amram, I believe, was from the Goinim, and he says in the Siddur Reb Amram, or he says that the reason why we say this prayer is because you don't have to connect Gula to Tefillah. So the exact opposite. According to Reb Amram, you don't. There's no need to, because we don't hold that Ma'ariv is Rishus, and you don't have to connect Gula to Tefillah. And the Tosfos, of course, argues on him, and he says, therefore, you have to be careful not to speak. Now, what's interesting is that although we hold that you're not allowed to interrupt, nevertheless, there are two things brought in Shulchan Aruch that a person could interrupt, that person interrupts for. I'm going to show you the Shulchan Aruch here, and let me just pull it up. I'm going to share screen. So it says the laws of the blessings of Shema by Ma'ariv. So, and this is Sefaria. It's a great website, by the way, sefaria.org. So he has the whole Shulchan Aruch, the whole Shas, and a lot of it is translated, a lot of commentaries. If you ever want to write your essays, you always could look something up here and find some commentary and talk about it. But anyway, here, the laws of Shema, he says, Ein L'Saper, we're in Halacha 2, chapter 236 of Shulchan Aruch, and Sif Beis, this paragraph 2. Ein L'Saper bein Geula, the Arvis L'Tfila, a person should not talk in between the blessing Geula of the Geula of Ma'ariv and Shemona Esrei. The Afa Noyig and Lema Yudches Psukim, and even the people who say the 18 Psukim and B'Yiro Einenu, Ein Lahafsik, they shouldn't interrupt Ben Yiro Einenu, let's feel between Yiro Einenu and Shemona Esrei. Umihu, however, Mashemachvish Shliach Tzibor, when the Shliach Tzibor announces Rosh Chodesh, Ben Kaddish, L'Tfilas Arvis, between Kaddish in Ma'ariv, they announced tonight is going to be Rosh Chodesh, right? And so in Ma'ariv, in some shuls, the chazan, the gabbai doesn't just bang on the bima. Sometimes he announces Yalav Yavai. So this that the chazan announces between Kaddish and Ma'ariv, he says Yalav Yavai like havi hefsek. It's not a hefsek. Kivan shu tzerach tefillah. It's considered like a need for tefillah. V'chein yachal leimer baruchu. And the same thing, you could say Baruch Hu lahoitzi mi shalei shama, to have in mind the person who didn't hear v'lei havi hefsek. It's not considered a hefsek. We don't say Baruch Hu then. If people miss, they don't say Baruch Hu. But it seems like there might have been such a custom to say Baruch Hu, or if maybe someone's in the middle of davening and he's at that point, and he finds a shul he walks into shul, or he hears there's a minyan in the other room, and they're saying Baruch Hu, he's allowed to answer Baruch Hu. And now the next sif, it says Matzah Tzibar Shekaru Kriyashma in Sif Gimel, paragraph 3. If you find a congregation that said Shema and they're about to daven Shmona Esrei B'Reitzim Lamay B'Tfila Yispalal Imahem, you should daven with them. And afterwards recite Shema with its blessings. So that's the that's the law in the Shulchan Aruch, and I guess that's the common minhag. I should mention the Alter Rebbe does not in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, he doesn't have this chapter. There's a number of chapters that are missing from the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and they were burned in a fire, and unfortunately we don't have them. But my understanding in general is that among Chassidim, we don't jump around. There's a purpose why the davening is Kabbalistically in this order. And so I'm not 100% sure, but I don't believe that I don't believe that we would that a Hasidic Rav would paskin to follow that order. We'd probably follow the common Kabbalistic way of every tefillah has to be in a certain order, and we can't jump. But I'm not 100% sure. So of course, if a person wants to ask the Rav, that person should do that. We are going to continue with the next little piece of Gemara. We are at the two dots. Amar Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar says, Amar Rebbe Avina. Now, there's a Gemara right afterwards in the next two dots that says Amar Rebbe Elazar bar Avina. So because of that, they say that the girsa here, the version should be read Amar Rebbe Elazar bar Avina, because then it flows with the next piece, which is also Rebbe Elazar bar Avina. So Rebbe Elazar, the son of Avina, says, Kol ha'omer Tehillah l'David b'chol yoim. Whoever says Tehillah l'David. Tehillah l'David is chapter 145 of Tehillim. Whoever says it every day, shalish pa'amim, 3 times, Muvtach lo yeshuhu ben olam haba. He is guaranteed that he is a ben olam haba. Now, don't get any ideas from here that you can go do all the sins in the book, and all you got to do is say Shema, say Tehillah l'David 3 times a day, and you will be exempt from any punishment, and you will have the highest levels of Gan Eden. You will have olam haba. It doesn't work that way. But the Gemara says that if you say it 3 times a day, you are guaranteed to have olam haba. What is this? What does that mean? So one explanation is that it means that if you say it 3 times a day, it will be a important factor in your judgment. It'll be a very positive merit for you if you say Tehillah l'David 3 times. Tehillah l'David, by the way, is Ashrei. We call it Ashrei, but the Gemara calls it Tehillah l'David. It's the reason is because Ashrei, the words Ashrei Yeshua B'Sech are from an earlier chapter in Psalms, and then Ashrei Am Shekachalai is actually from the paragraph before it. So the main paragraph is Tehillah l'David. We just add these 2 other verses from previous Tehillims. Now, so it's called Tehillah l'David. So if you say it 3 times a day, this will be a significant merit for you to getting to Olam Haba. So not that it's the only thing that you need to get to Olam Haba, but it helps very strongly. It helps. Now, another explanation is that if a person says Tehillah l'David Ashrei 3 times a day, it will give him the spiritual boost that he won't end up sinning in others. If he says it with the proper understanding, it'll give him inspiration for the whole day that he won't end up sinning and cause him to do a sin that he'll lose his olam haba. So these are the two explanations of why that is. But basically, if you say Ashrei 3 times a day, you are guaranteed olam haba. My timer, what is the reason? Ilema mishum da'asya ba'alef base. If the reason is because it has the aleph base in it, if you look at the beginning of every verse, it has the entire aleph base, just about the entire aleph base in the Ashrei prayer. Every verse starts with another letter of the alphabet, and it goes in order. And maybe that gives it special importance, and therefore therefore we considered a special tefillah. Maybe that's the good part of it. It's either because you're praising Hashem with every letter of the alphabet, or praising Hashem with every sound possible. So maybe that's the great thing about Ashrei. But if that's so, if you're going to say that's the reason, Nema Ashrei Smimei Dorech, you should say the chapter 119 of Psalms. Now, chapter Bitmanya Apin, it has 8 aleph bases. The chapter 119 of Psalms is the longest psalm in the whole book of Psalms, and it has 176 verses. The reason it has 176 verses is because there's 22 letters of the alphabet, and it says each letter 8 times. So if you multiply 8 times 22, so it has 8 times Aleph, then you have 8 verses starting with the letter base, 8 verses starting with letter Gimel. So 8 times 22 is 176. So it has 176 verses in it. Interestingly enough, the longest Torah portion is Parshas Nasai, which also has 176 verses in it. And the longest Talmudic tractate is Baba Basra, and it also has 176 verses in it. I don't know what the connection is, but I once came up with a gematria that if the word nisayon is gematria 176, and so it's the biggest challenge to take on one of these. When you say Tehillim, the last Tehillim you want to say is the 119, the verse, chapter 119. It's just so long, and the last tractate of Shas you'd want to learn. I mean, it's a challenge. It'd be a challenge to learn it. But anyway, I don't know why it's 176, but that's basically the Tehillim has 8 verses for every letter of the alphabet. And that would seem to be much better than the Ashrei. Ashrei is only 1 verse, one time the alphabet. Here you have 8. And so it should be the Tehillim, the 119th chapter, if it was because of the Aleph base. So the Gemara says, Ela mishum, rather, the reason is mishum de'isbei poiseches yodecha. It has a beautiful verse saying, Hashem, open up your hand, umaspia l'chol chai rotzin. Open up your hand, and you open your hand, and you give us all willingly sustenance. So it's a beautiful praise of Hashem, and maybe that's why it's considered such an important prayer, the Ashrei prayer. But if that's so, Nema Halal Hagadol. Let's say the chapter of Tehillim that's called Halal Hagadol, the large Halal. Why is it called Halal Hagadol? It's a special prayer that has in it this verse, it says in that chapter 136 that Hashem gives bread to all living, because forever is his kindness. So it's a great hallel. It's a great praise for Hashem, and maybe that chapter would be better than Asher, or at least the same. It's a very similar verse. Ella mishum disbei tarti. So the Gemara says, you know why it's such an important prayer? Because it has both. It has the aleph base, and also it has this verse of Pesach es Yodecha, which is considered a very important pasuk. In fact, it's brought down that if a person doesn't think about the meaning of it, he should recite it again. Go back and say Pesach es Yodecha again to think of the meaning. We're supposed to have in mind, think about Hashem gives sustenance to everyone when you say the pasuk Pesach es Yodecha. So that is the end of this little piece of Gemara. How it exactly connects to the previous Gemara, it seems like it's emphasizing the previous Gemara said a ben olam haba, and here we're also telling you you're muftach to be a ben olam haba. So maybe that's the connection why it says it here. Because the previous Gemara said that if you connect geula to tefillah, you are a ben olam haba. And this Gemara says if you say ashrei 3 times, you're a ben olam haba. So that's what it would seem to me to be the connection why it's bringing this Gemara right here.